Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Restitching the Tapestry, episode 31. We always nerd out about poetry reading episodes. So I think this is like maybe our second or third one. So we're really excited because this one is a super special episode because it's our first episode where we have a guest joining us. And we have our dear friend, Jared Morningstar. Hello, Jared. How are you doing tonight?
I am doing well, Donny. How are you?
I am quite well.
Excellent.
And excitingly, this is also the first time that Jared and Ari are meeting each other face to face virtually. So this is also an exciting moment too. Ari, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks again.
Are you excited to read some poems as well? I know we're
I am fantastic. I'm so super excited to hear Jared Morningstar's poems because he mentioned that this is the first time he's done a reading of his poetry.
for American Reality, that
Yes.
Yeah.
specific collection. So like it's kind of debut-ish when you think about it. I don't even know if that's a
Yes.
word, but it is one now. So
There is one now, and that's what matters.
so far we have Leo tuning in and Taylor tuning in. So if anybody has any questions or reactions to our reading as we proceed, don't hesitate to comment them in the chat box because I will be keeping track of them as we go. So before we get started with our reading, I do want to be sure that we read our show's mission statement. Okay. Many witness different atrocities, large or small, that fray the social fabric around us, and much of the time, many may feel powerless and know not how to address such things. This fray has gotten worse with the rise of social media as we are able to share trauma collectively as it goes viral in real time, and that grief and outrage is expressed and experienced collectively on a mass scale. So that begs the question of what can we do to mend the communities that have seen considerable tragedy, most of which privileged groups have caused, and many who won't admit their personal involvement. So our goal with this show is to work together by restitching the tapestry through conversation, creativity, action, and education. And what better way to do that than through poetry? Like poetry has often been considered throughout history as being a vehicle for creating social change and a vehicle for creating commentary on atrocities taking place or, you know, larger events taking place as well. So, and undoubtedly there will be some pieces read tonight that will create commentary on things happening. So here we go. I'm pretty excited. So before Jared, before I have you read any work, I do want to ask you a couple of questions about your writing. So, my first question would be, could you tell us a little bit about American Fries and your newest book, American Reality? What would you say the messages are of both of those books?
Sure. American Fries and American Reality are two books that I think actually work pretty well as companions. The titles alone, I think, suggest that we're talking about books that are targeted specifically on America, the American topic. And when I was putting together my first book, American Fries, Poems and Stories, I it was almost a happy accident. Thank you, right there.
I have them ready.
Thematically, it was kind of a happy accident. It was originally just going to be a collection of different things I had written over the years, and I realized that while the topics were pretty widely varied to a certain extent, they all managed to somehow magically connect to the topic of America, and a lot of it was critical. Some of the pieces in there dealt with politics and social commentary, but there was also a lot of pop culture in there. Fantasy figures, like your Santa Clauses, food, just different topics like that, reality TV, and so I thought, well, the title American Fries kind of works because it's fun, but it's also a little bit of a jab at the whole we don't say French fries, we say freedom fries thing from years back.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was kind of fun. And then I didn't expect to be putting out anything new as far as a book wise right away, but I started writing a bunch of stuff. And American reality, like fries, I think is definitely focused on the topic of America. But unlike fries, I feel like it's targeted more on politics, political culture, social criticism. And I feel like it's the darker of the two books. So even though they're companions, and even though Fries definitely has its critical spots, I feel like American Reality is probably the darker, more political book of the two. Certainly more thematically consistent.
Yeah, those were great explanations. I know I really enjoyed reading
That's
both
rough to
books.
say though, because in American Fries, you had some pretty dark
I
stories.
do.
Like the story of the prison system where they have a theme show, and I mean that was a pretty dark story. So to say that American Reality is darker than that, I mean that's saying something.
I think there's nothing in American Reality quite like Slice of American Pie, that story that you're talking about. That
Yeah.
certainly is a dark piece. There's no question about that. But I think it might be the darkest piece in that book, where I think across the board there are probably more dark pieces in reality. Like, I don't think, aside from maybe a couple of poems, um, actually, no, I can only think of one that's completely darkness free. It's a pretty dark little book. It's not a There's a little bit of hope, but I wouldn't say that there's a lot of obvious hope.
Mhm.
Like I really focusing on American Fries first. I think what I really enjoyed the most about that book is how like it does create commentary about, and I know I've mentioned this before, about toxic patriotism, for example. And I really focused in on how our toxic patriotism is like sitting down at a diner, to kind of go along with the theme of the book. It's like sitting down at a diner and gorging on all of this, you know, American, pride and patriotism, and then feeling like that heavy feeling afterward, but still feeling some form of satisfaction as a result. Whereas American Reality for me was kind of like pulling away the curtain and being like, look at all the carbs you just ate. Look at, and kind of like that, just like seeing the man behind the curtain in a way when it comes to talking about the toxic nature of patriotism and these different extremes that we see on a regular basis, especially over the past few years, notably.
That's a really interesting comment. Because just to go to the story that Ari was bringing up, there is a character in Slice of American Pie who developed over several, because that story is like 15, 16 years old. Um,
Oh, is it?
and it went over several drafts. There's a character in there, the producer of the show, Wallace Griffin, who slowly evolved into this darker, Trumpian kind of character. And he really does become the man behind the mask, the man behind the curtain in
Mhm.
that story more and more. Like, he is like the ultimate villain. Like, there's no sympathy for that character. There's nothing human about that character. But he might be the only, like you said, Donnie, he might be the only example of a character like that in American Fries. Whereas, yeah, I think that was a really, really good analysis, actually. I think, because I think, yeah, you could definitely say that reality is full of more of the man behind the curtain.
Hmm.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Was Trump a big influence with you with American Reality? Did you feel inspired a lot with by Trump?
Yes, Absolutely. And it's not like, and I've told people this before, it's not like Trump came out of nowhere, right? Um, I don't think we'd have a Trump in our history in politics if not for a Rush Limbaugh or not for those kind of talking heads that really started to dominate the Republican Party and politics and how people just catered to that attitude, not just like under the surface, but blatantly in your face. And I think a lot of the pieces in reality were probably more targeted towards the events of the last few years. And it's not all Trump. I mean, there's COVID stuff in there too, and there's a lot of commentary that's not necessarily directed. But I mean, as a writer and artist, I think that it's impossible not to be influenced by someone with his ideology, someone with his language and his politics constantly in your face, sitting in a position where he's the most powerful person on the planet. And this is the person who has that power. He definitely was on my mind a lot. Doesn't show up very much directly, but definitely an influence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So, I mean, looking at the writing process of both books. Now, you already touched on it a little bit, but obviously you mentioned that American Fries, like some of the pieces in it, have been in like either completed or in some form of editing process for the last 10 years or more, right? So after releasing American Fries, like how did your process shift or change or remain consistent when it came to writing American Reality?
That's a really good question. I think that it's more along the lines of my aesthetic developing. When I wrote 10, 15 years ago, I didn't even know what in the world I was doing, really. I mean, not those first drafts, and not the ones that are in Fries, but the first drafts of those that were in Fries. I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't really have a lot of specific, because I didn't write that much, and so I didn't have time to really develop a voice or topics that I liked, things I cared about. Whereas with Reality, the vast majority of that stuff, there are a couple of rework pieces in there, but a lot of it is new, and so I feel like it's I don't know if the process is any different, although I think that with American Reality, a lot of the sequencing and the pieces chosen were more purposeful than there were with Fries. It wasn't the happy accident that Fries was. It really wasn't a difference in writing process so much as it just is myself developing, not just as someone who writes poetry and stories, but as just as an individual. What are my cares? What are my concerns? And I think, if anything, that's where the difference comes in. With aside from just like the fact that a more experienced writer wrote Reality than Fries. I think that's a bigger difference than just the process, because the process is still pretty much the same. I don't write on a regular schedule. I wish I could, but I'm just not that way. I write in flurries. I write whenever the inspiration hits, and that process is mainly the same. It's just more or less a difference in growth, both as a person and as a writer.
Interesting. I do have a slightly spontaneous question inspired by what you just said. So, I've personally never written a collection of poems and stories, only collections of poems. So, when it comes to like determining the order of how you organize your books when it comes to poetry and fiction, like what is your thought process with that? Like how do you make those important decisions based on ordering inside the text?
Oh,
That's
a good
a
question.
really good question. I and part of it's simple and part of it is more complex. I think that I think when it comes to the simple part of it is I separate the poems from the stories. I put the poems first, the story second. I did that with Fries, and I did it with the new book, American Reality. That's the easy part for me. And my wife, when she published her book, the poems are mixed with the stories, and that's just what she wanted to do. And thematically, that's just the way it worked for her. I didn't want to do it that way, but the more complex part is the sequencing themselves, getting the feel like, what do I start with? What kind of poems go in the middle? What kind of poems go at the end? And the same thing with the stories. And I approach it like I'm making a mixtape, because I make a lot of mixtapes. I still like to make, whether it's a physical CD or a Spotify playlist or whatever. I try to think like someone who's making an album. Like what kind of piece would I start with? And it would be, I try to think, well, what's a piece that I can put in here that will give people a taste, something that will get them interested at the beginning. Maybe that's not the best piece, because I didn't want to do that, but something that will be a good, like a preview, coming attractions kind of piece to get things started. And then slowly work in to probably a little bit of the deeper cuts, the more interesting material in the middle. And I try to mix it up. So I'm like, I don't want to put, two pieces of the same topic together. And I just try to feel like, okay, so what's the best flow going to be? And so it feels like it's a put together album. It's a sequenced album. And I know that at least one of the happier pieces, the lighter pieces in the middle. And I separated like the dark and the dark, and then I got to the end, and the back end of the book, actually the darkness is still there with the poems, I should say, but there also is some lessons learned at the back end of the poetry section, and then I get to the stories, and it's kind of the same thing with reality specifically. The last two pieces, Nashville Blues, which is the long story in the book.
One of my favorite stories you've written.
Thank you. That also goes back over a decade. That's an old story that has been reworked to death. I have worked more on that story than anything else in preparation for this book, because that story was a mess. When I found it, after years of not looking at it, it was a mess. So it was fun, but it was exhausting. And then I was still afraid that it wasn't any good. But in the context of the book, I think it makes sense. It's because it thematically lines up. But that story ends as dark as it is, because there's not a lot of good things that happen to those characters in that book. There's a moment where there's just like, yeah, it's dark, but maybe it's still going to be okay. And then it goes into the final story, Reason to Believe, which is very much in that same vein. A lot of darkness. There's no light at the end of the tunnel, but the characters are going to still look for that light at the end of the tunnel anyway. That reason, that hoping beyond hope. And so even though it is a dark book, and I want to make sure the darkness stays present, I also wanted to make sure that there was just a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. It's just that they might not see it. And I'm not sure why I organized it that way. It's specifically with reality. It might have been, okay, so one of my favorite albums of all time is Bruce Springsteen's Nebraska, which is a phenomenal record. It's unlike a lot of what he's done, because it's just a bunch of acoustic demos with a guitar, murder ballads. Like it's very much a social commentary kind of record written in reaction to the Reagan era of the early 80s. And that album is backed with a track called A Reason to Believe, just like the story is in my book. And it kind of follows the same format. So I don't know if I was inspired by that or what, but again, it's an album. And that's kind of like how I think about when I organize my book. Like, okay, what's an experience? And it was easier with reality, I think, just because everything was so thematically consistent and connected. Does that make sense?
Wow, that's super interesting. And I'm kind of nerding out, because when putting together my own book, Carbon Footprint, I kind of thought of it as an album as well. because I do, like, I am pretty obsessed with music and the creation process behind it. So like that really resonated with me. Um, and like I found your explanation very poignant in a way of American realities focus on not being able to see a light at the end of the tunnel necessarily, but the need to at least look for that light. Like, I feel like that's very much the headspace that we are all in right now, or at least a lot of us are in America, for example, because so much has been happening. We are coming out of, quote unquote, a very difficult time, and we're arguably still in it. And I know
Absolutely.
many of us are asking ourselves, like, is there a light, or are we just bracing for the next tsunami of, ridiculousness, right?
It's what I'm afraid of.
So, yeah, like, and I think that commentary that you create in American reality is unbelievably significant. So, all right. Are we ready to read some stuff?
Sure.
I'm excited to hear you read some of your work. So, do you want to read like 2 or 3 pieces?
Yeah,
All
sure.
right.
Should we
Feel
do
free. Oh, go ahead.
all reality stuff?
Whatever you want to do.
Let's do all reality stuff.
Sounds good to me.
Some of these I have not read.
Yeah, like let the world hear them.
All right. Let's do learning the game. That's my
Yes.
opening piece in the book. And this was the last piece I wrote that made it in the book. And I ended up opening the book. And this poem came to me on February 3rd. It was the anniversary of the day the music died. And as I usually do, I listened to a lot of Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, Big Bopper tracks, because I'm a big 50s rock guy. And the one of his Buddy Holly's final, he was only 22 when he died. And I think a lot of people forget about that. That's crazy young. And we're talking about a guy that could have been, and he already was huge. And one of his final tracks that he wrote, it existed only as a demo that they found in his apartment, an acoustic demo, was called Learning the Game. And I listened to that song over and over and over again. And I could write something like this thematically that would fit the book and also as a tribute to Buddy Holly. And I open in the book with a quote from the song. And the Buddy Holly quote from the song goes, "When she says that you're the only one she'll ever love, but then you find you are not the one she's thinking of, that's when you're learning the game." Here's the poem. Just before the plane crashes into the frozen Iowa ground, you realize you'll never play another concert hall. Set the nation on fire again with those 6 strings on that gorgeous Stratocaster. Make American youth believe that you are some horn-rimmed musical Clark Kent who's here to make them dance, to give them hope that they, too, can live the dream. It's then you remember that the only reason your life is about to end, the reason you'll never hold your beautiful wife again, is because you had to go on tour, take that flight, to make up for the money that management bastards kept from you, stole from you through bad contracts and backstabbing. And it hits you seconds before your fantasy ends that you're just another working class boy from Lubbock who was fooled into believing that you really mattered by those who have gorged themselves on the fortune you earned and will continue to feast on it long after you're buried in the cold earth that will soon take your last breath. It's then, my friend, that you're learning the game.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Wow. Like, I think that, like, that's the perfect introductory poem to the commentary that you're creating, because it, like, for me, like, it largely pulls the curtain down in front of that assembly line that we are conditioned to follow, you know, that working world, that American dream striving, like that really, that resonates a lot.
I
Thank
like
you.
the allusion to Superman, and how it's sort of like he's on stage and he's this superhuman person, but he's still very vulnerable.
Yes.
And what makes this Superman figure interesting is we don't really think of the process that this person went through in becoming Superman or sustaining this Superman image. Like that, I mean, when we pull back the curtain, I'm just going to keep saying pull back the curtain and see that for the reality that it is, like that's very jarring when you think about it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it was I think it was the line in the song that I read, like it's America, right? Like it's the record companies, the management people. Oh, we love you. You're so great. But they're not thinking of him. They're thinking of themselves. And I know that the line in the song is about a relationship, but I tried to bend that whole line when I wrote the poem to fit something different.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm glad that it resonated and that it works.
Yeah.
Love it.
Thank you.
So what one would you like to read next?
All right. Let's do one more piece that I think is a little darker, but kind of fun. I probably have had more fun writing this next piece than I ever have in any other poem in my entire life. This next piece I call Boneless Wings and Republican Jesus.
Yes, I was hoping that it would be this one.
Well, good. All right, here we go. For real, though, to hell with boneless wings. Half the fun of eating wings is tearing the meat off the bone. And what's up with the breading? Makes for an entirely different consistency. They're nothing but glorified chicken nuggets. Same bland taste with a more expensive price tag. Seriously, how can these fools not see through the lie? Then again, some time ago, folks believed in a fountain of youth, a city of gold, that the earth is the center of the universe, that the earth is flat. Oh, wait, some still do, huh? Just as some still believe that the moon landing was an illusion, that Sandy Hook was a hoax, that we live in a post-racial society just because we elected a mixed-race president, that being gay is an abomination. The same folks who refuse to believe in evolution, but think that somehow their love your neighbor, Lord and Savior, who preached that wealth wouldn't save souls, was a secret social Darwinist who drank from golden cups and would turn the other cheek to urban poverty because those bums should have pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. Of course, folks believe that saucy nuggets are chicken wings. Some folks will believe anything.
Oh, like when I read the book, I loved reading it to myself, but listening to you read it, it takes on like a different life of its own, you know? I think that, and that happens very often when you listen to the poets read their work. So I really appreciate that poem because while it is intended to be funny in a way, that the irony is that cruel reality of we literally believe, or a lot of people literally believe anything, even at their own expense or at the expense of other people.
Right, right, exactly. And they don't think about that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Half the time, I think people believe in conspiracy theories just because they want to feel smarter than other people. They want to feel like, oh, we got the inside information. When really they're just being duped. And I feel bad for them. You know, there are other ways to educate yourself, or reach out to others better, who understand things. Stop being such an egomaniac and sit down and just learn and listen. It's not that hard. And when you don't do that, you fall susceptible to a lot of these things. And I think it's a real shame, but, look at how they're getting an education more difficult, hiking up the student loan rates, making books more expensive, and then trying to tell people, well, you're not going to get a job anyway. As if going to school is just about getting a job. And that's always bothered me. Like, how is going to school, getting an education? I get that you want to get a job. I get that you want to get paid. We have to do that in this society. But at some point, school is about expanding your mind, not teaching you what to think, but teaching you how to think. And a lot of people just don't know how to think.
And teaching people how to find fulfillment in it too. Like,
Just to be a
I
better
think
person.
Yeah, exactly. It all comes back down to like that we're conditioned to fall in line with that assembly line and to just keep churning out work, 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 So, wow, both of those were amazing. Both. Do you want to read another poem or?
I can. Yes.
Yeah. If you have the time, my friend, go for it.
I'll read something a little bit not quite as dark, maybe a little more uplifting. I have never read this one ever to anybody. It's the first time I've read this out loud. It is one of my favorites. And it was inspired by one of my favorite artists, Jason Isbell. And my wife and I, we listen to Jason Isbell stuff all the time in the car. We think he's just absolutely phenomenal. Our favorite songwriter of our generation. This piece is called "Thank You for Helping Me Learn How to Be a Real Man." Thank you for telling us that you don't know what being a real man means, because now I don't feel so alone. I've always preferred guitars over guns, and it made me an outcast growing up in a town where schools choose to celebrate deer season over Dr. King, violence and death over peace and love. Thank you for helping me understand that it's okay for men to cry, to be vulnerable, that strength isn't always about sucking it up, keeping up a granite countenance when inside you're a house of cards on a windy day. For telling me in rhyme that my day will come, that even on the hardest of days, to remember that things will get easier, that they can do so without the bottle or pills. Thanks for helping me see that, as beautiful as the open road can be, there is no shame in being tired of traveling alone, but also for showing me that a real man lets a woman drive too, that no relationship can thrive when one person is relegated to the passenger seat, and that when the road gets rocky, you can't just run away with your eyes closed, that if you want her to be your crutch when you can't stand on your feet, sometimes you better be willing to put her first, to let her take the wheel. And thanks for showing me that real strength is not found in a clenched fist, but in your character, and selflessness over selfishness, and asking what you have done to help others instead of what others have done to help you. That real men aren't afraid to stand up for what they believe in, that they don't just shut up and sing, but that they don't need a club or a sword when a pen, a paintbrush, a microphone will send a louder message, one that solves problems instead of starting them or making them worse. You need to know that I am listening, that you aren't just writing sad songs, riffing on that 59 Les Paul, giving the audience a 90-minute escape from their everyday realities. You aren't just a rock star, an artist, or a storyteller. You're a healer, an inspiration, an educator. and for helping teach me how to be a better husband to my wife, father to my children, and man, a real man in a world that needs them. Thank you. Thank you.
That is a beautiful poem. Like that, again, follows this trajectory in your book where you are continually going through and disempowering a lot of the conditioning that we are, conditioned and educated to perceive and to act on, whether it be toxic patriotism, toxic masculinity. That really resonated. That really resonated.
Thank you.
So
favorites.
Oh, what was that?
It's one of my favorites.
I would say that is one of my favorites that you've ever written. It's really good. And I'm secretly happy that you chose to read that one next. So
I guess
so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read off a couple of the comments in the chat box, and then I'll ask you your final question, because I've already kept you over the time that we had already considered. So thank you for staying this extra few minutes.
Not a problem. It's been fun.
I really appreciate it. So let's see. Rogue Agent Killer Rodan said amazing. My friend Taylor, who is also a colleague of ours at SVSU, said, I came out to have fun, and honestly, I'm feeling so attacked. # boneless wings. Yes.
See, I don't have here's my thing with boneless wings. I don't have a problem with them. I just wish they weren't called chicken wings. If they were called saucy nuggets, I swear I wouldn't have a problem.
I still prefer boneless wings over regular wings, because I would eating them with a fork is easy. Regular wings, I just fumble around and I don't even know what to do with them half the time. So
we're still friends. It'll be all right.
I don't know how to have this conversation with all of you, because I'm a vegetarian sitting over here going, I don't know.
Ari's like, ooh, I'm glad that you don't have to worry about that. I love it.
I love the comment there.
Leo says people follow conspiracy theories because it allows them to look at a complex issue through a simple explanation that is easy to comprehend, even if it's incorrect.
That's a great comment.
Yes.
Great comment.
Definitely. Leo also says, wonderful poem. Shayna says, boneless wings over bone wings. And then Rogue Agent Killer Rodan says, keep it up. And then also made a comment about planning on making some short stories. So this actually conveniently leads into my final question for you, my friend. What advice do you have for aspiring writers?
I didn't even know this question was coming, and I feel like I've got a prepped answer for it. Because I'm a teacher, and so I work with young writers all the time that want to get better at writing. And here's my advice. Really 3 steps to my answer here. The first thing I advise people to do is read lots of good stuff. There are a lot of people out there who have great imaginations and big ideas, bigger imaginations than I've got. But that can only take you so far. You have to work at getting better at your craft. And I think that exposing yourself to great writers, people of different styles and different formats, look at what they do, read what they do, study what they don't do. Don't just read for entertainment, but read to learn something. And don't just learn from themes, but look at their styles and what they do with different techniques. Reading definitely makes you better. When you can see what the masters are doing, then it helps. It's like finding tools for your toolbox. I haven't met very many people who can become a good writer without being a strong reader. That's my first point. My second point, and this is a hard one for a lot of my students. My second point is where I read a lot of good stuff. Number 2 is don't be afraid to write a lot of bad stuff, because you're going to write a lot of bad stuff. And this doesn't become a problem from what I've seen, and I've been teaching now for, it's crazy, like 14, 15 years. What I see with a lot of kids is writer's block doesn't really hit them so much until they start figuring out how to write. And once they start figuring out how to write, then they get really critical of themselves because they know what good writing is. And if they can't pull it off, I see a lot of their brains shut down. I know my brain has shut down. And you start questioning yourself, like, this isn't any good. What do I do? And so people either stop writing or they just throw their stuff away. And I tell them, you can't worry about that. There's no shame in sitting down and writing garbage. First of all, it keeps your brain working and it keeps practice going. But I also tell people all that bad stuff you save, I don't care if it's in a journal or a file on the internet or like a Word file or whatever, save it. Don't throw it away. Don't be embarrassed because you never know when little nuggets, even if the draft is trash, even if there's a line or an image or something that you might come back to years later and find it works perfectly in a piece or it inspires something. A good example of that is in American Fries. There's a story called Saying Goodbye to Baby Blue. It still might be my favorite piece I've written. I love that story. There was a line in a poem that I also wrote 14, 15 years ago when I didn't know what I was doing. And the line was, I feel 80 years old. I still have not done anything with that poem. I have no idea what I could possibly do with it. But that line, I always liked that line. And when I was putting together that story, oh my gosh, that line fits perfectly there. If you get yourself out of the mindset that every piece you write has to be like this fantastic piece right out of the gate, if you can get yourself out of that, if you're not afraid to write bad stuff, that you know you can go back to that later, and you might not do anything with it, you don't know. But you got to keep the brain working. You got to save your stuff because we all need inspiration. Finding little bits and pieces of inspiration can pull you out of writer's block. And so I tell people that. Don't be afraid. Write your stuff. Get it out there. If it's crap, it's crap. It might not be crap 10 years later when you got stuff in that book that you can go back and be inspired by. And then my third thing is to share your work. That can be challenging because sharing, I think, whether it's your poetry or your short stories or anything that's personal, that's something that you made, whether or not it has anything to do with you, it's still personal. It's almost like a child, like a word child or whatever. It's not like writing a page. And you have to share it though. Eventually you got to let yourself be vulnerable, get your pieces out there, and you have to be willing to, of course, accept praise. We all like that. But you have to be willing to listen to other people and what they think about your work. Because and that's regardless of experience level. You could be someone who's written for a long time, but don't have this big of an ego to think that you hand that story or that poem to a novice and that they don't know what they're doing, and so you don't need to listen to them. Because I think you do. There have been so many times when I have shared pieces with my own students, and they'll, some of them are just getting started, and they'll think of something that I didn't think of. Well, that's great. Again, part of it is being unafraid to be. You don't have to be afraid about being vulnerable, but you can't. But you have to push forward. But also don't have a big ego. Listen. You don't have to accept every piece of feedback. It's your piece. But unless you get your ideas out there and you're sharing your pieces, you're not getting all that wonderful feedback. And feedback is so important. And I understand that requires sometimes finding people you trust, not yes people, but people that you trust, people you know that will give you honest feedback. And a lot of that, I guess, is part of finding a good community. But good communities are out there, whether it's just a small group of friends or whether it's a regular writing group. You still got to find some sort of outreach, some sort of group that you can send your stuff out there and get ideas bounced back to you. And then maybe being part of a group, you'll see what other people are doing and their work will inspire your work. I think those three things are what I offer. Those are the biggest pieces of advice I can give to a writer who wants to get better at their craft.
That's wonderful, wonderful advice. And like I know as like I can definitely relate to much of that. And in some ways, like despite writing for years, like sometimes those struggles still crop up from time to time, but it's knowing how to navigate through them even when you are experienced that really matters too. So that really was that resonated amazingly. So before I let you go, one more comment. The compliment of the evening, Shayna says that we are the holy trinity of writers. So Shayna, that made my day. Thank you.
Mine too.
All right, Jared, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us and to read some of your work. For those of you who are interested in American Fries and American Reality, you can get them on Amazon. So please go check those out. And of course, shout out to Alien Buddha Press for being phenomenal and giving our, writing, a home.
Yes.
So we really appreciate that. All right, Jared, you have a great night. Give everyone my love, and I will talk to you soon.
Donny, Ari, it has been a pleasure. Thank you both so much.
Come back again.
Oh, anytime. I'm ready.
Bye. Oh, Ari.
I just bought my copy of American Reality. Even though I got a free copy for review, I was like, I'm going to purchase a copy.
Yes. See, like, and the thing is, like, writers, like for those of us who go through small presses, like Alien Buddha Press, like we base a lot of our own success on word of mouth, interviews like this, so on and so forth. So if you can support small presses and writers who publish through small presses, like we really appreciate it. It means a lot to us. So Ari, how do you feel about going beyond the top of the hour?
I think so, because we are like at 47 minutes right now.
Yeah, but we're on a roll. I think we're definitely on a roll. So
I think it's time for you to read a poem, Donny.
oh hell. Okay, I would be happy to. So I'm gonna probably read a couple of pieces tonight. So the first piece I'm gonna read from Carbon Footprint, which is my first collection. Shameless self-promotion, I just announced that my second collection is coming out in the fall. It's going to be titled Feats of Alchemy. So if you have read Carbon Footprints, I hope that you're looking forward to that. Suffice it to say, it's going to be a rather political, let's just say a super gay, super political, super sci-fi-ish collection of poems. So a very odd triad of things, but hey, what are you gonna do?
I've known about this for a little while, and I've been super excited about this.
Ari, you know how to make my day. You just simply know how to make my day. So the first poem that I want to read tonight is actually one of the earlier poems in my book. I'm really irresponsible and bad. I really didn't put sticky notes in my book to prepare for this. Ari, you're way more prepared than I am, but hey.
I put way too many sticky notes because I thought I'd have time. So I've got like all the sticky notes.
I love it. So the first poem that I'm going to read is a poem in my first collection, and then the second poem I'm going to read is one of my newer poems that's going to be in Feats of Alchemy. All right. So this poem, like the reason why I wrote it is because I was in Las Vegas. My brother and his wife took us to Red Rock Canyon, and I was just very inspired by the environment. It's a very beautiful location. And in some of my poems, I kind of flirt with the idea of escapism. And if you follow my Donny Speaks channel, I actually just posted a small segment talking about escapism and carbon footprint. And this is one poem that also encapsulates that theme. It's titled Mountains Speak. Green clings to dust-heavy, ragged trees high in the mountain pass. Behemoth peaks rise over canyon walls and fail to hide me in their shadows, shrouds darker than mine. Jagged rocks jut into crystal blue, infringe upon the sky's brushstroke clouds until their sun-baked eyes catch my fossilized imprint. My fingers trace the smoothness of weathered monoliths. I plant my feet in beds of stone, root myself in the Mesozoic. The wind isn't sure if it should howl or speak in a consistent whisper, both of which I fully know. Today, excuse me, I leave a ghost to linger along the desert trail. He murmurs in dialogue with rock, mumbles to passers-by about his thirst, but is dismissed as faint mountains speak. Now he stands high on the bluff, finds solace in mountain brawn, and knows he weathers like rock erodes until it's gone. So that one is Mountain
I know
Speak.
that area very well, and I can almost see it when you describe it.
Biggest compliment ever, because I as I was reading it, I was like, Ari's well familiar with that area. So I'm hoping that I'm doing it justice.
No, you did it great. It's so amazing.
Oh, that really means a lot to me. Thank you. So I hope you know this is going to be my last poem, and then the rest of the evening is going to feature your work, which I might read one more. One more after that. We'll see. We'll see. So, let's
But can we
see.
talk about this poem for a second?
Yes, of course.
Cause oh my God, it's so I really like the just like just the hollowness of it, and just like how it's just fading into like one thing after another. Like you're standing in it, but it's like there's like a wind whipping through. It's like you can almost feel it coming through as you're like standing there. It's almost like you're standing with you as the writer, and it's like you can almost feel that wind coming through with it, but it's almost like it's a ghost that it's like it's coming through and it's whispering to you. What is it whispering? It's whispering the sound of the canyon, and the canyon is bringing, I don't know, a sense of like hollow, but hollow like um of what was, I don't know, like
Like,
I
yeah,
can't explain this feeling that this poem gives me, but it's like it's so beautiful, and it's so old, and it's so interesting, and it's so big, and it's so beautiful. I love it.
thank you. That really means a lot to me. And I think you really captured the essence of the poem in your explanation and analysis, because coming from Michigan, and you are, I mean, since you live in Michigan as well, like you're familiar that we're surrounded by trees and hills and everything, like and lakes. Everything feels like very, I don't want to say compact, but very nestled. And going to a place where you would think that the mountains would kind of nestle you and make you feel secure, I felt this sublime kind of beautiful unsettlement in standing in this like large canyon where there's so much open space and open sky and so many rock faces. Like it felt like it was unsettling, it felt isolating, but it felt like that isolation has a purpose, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
That's what really drew me to that place. So, and I really hope that I get to go back to that place at some point too. So, do we want to take turns, or do you want me to read another one?
I'll read one and then you read one.
Sounds good to me.
I So my family really likes this poem. So it's the first poem in Full of Now, my poetry book that I've written. It's
I'm
actually
glad you
about
did not see me do that, Ari, because I literally was like, flail.
It's the first poem in the book. It's about a fight, actually. There are several poems that I wrote that are about fights. And I always take something away from the fights as to what I learned from them, or a meaning from them, or just something that I learned from that fight. Um, and sometimes it's not always a good thing, but not always a bad thing. But from this fight, I learned uh, I don't know, it's just not a good thing necessarily. I don't know. But the poem is titled "I Liked the Old You." How do we speak these truths when my mouth is sewn shut? How do I scream to the heavens when you want me silent? For nothing else, I am forever yours, a quiet being, stoic and peaceful waiting. What's next, I think, as the tension and anger builds? Another fight, another day, until you pack up and disappear into the night. So,
You
um,
know, oh, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you
no,
off.
you go.
I was just going to say, one of my favorite aspects of your poems is there's dialogue in a way in your poems, as it's the persona or you like posing questions, putting out these subliminal thoughts, even though you're not getting a response from someone else. And this poem definitely exudes this sense of isolation. Like you feel as though you're being silenced. You want to speak out, but you're unable to because you're tied to you're tied to this individual, and you know that all you can do is wait in a way for the inevitable. Like to me, like this poem felt
But
like the
there's also a
persona.
sense of, like, ego about it because it's, like, stoic and peaceful waiting, and
Mhm.
it's, like, there's a sense of, like, self-deception with it because it's, like, I don't necessarily think that the person myself is necessarily stoic and peaceful waiting either. Um, eh, that I was feeling that at the time, so it's sort of like necessarily, like, a first person perspective that's skewed. So it's
Oh,
like
interesting. So like you're giving the indication to that the person you're speaking to that you are stoic and peaceful on the outside, when on the inside you really know that that is not the case.
right.
Ooh, that really hits close because I've like that. I can really relate with that. But like, and again, I love that you incorporate questions in a lot of your poems, like these posed questions, because it makes the audience think, is it the persona asking these questions, or should I be asking these questions as well, placing myself in the piece? Like, I think it really draws the audience in very well.
Mhm.
So, nerding out. And I do think it's a really good way to start your collection of poems, because Full of Now is an exploration. From my interpretation, it is an exploration of a mental health journey
Of
where
how
there.
I used to be as opposed to how I am now.
Exactly. So, like, the battle in that this poem is bringing to life may not necessarily just be a battle with another person, but an internal battle too. An internal battle where there is a self-realization that's needed, but not accessed at this point in the book. Does that make sense? Did I make that? Was that clear? Like I kind of talked
That's
myself
clear.
in a
That's
circle.
clear, yeah. No, it's good.
Ah, I love it. All right, my turn.
Yes, let's hear it. Is this from the new one?
This is a new poem. Yes. Okay. So This poem I wrote a few days ago. This is probably the freshest piece I've ever read. It's probably going to go through some edits, so consider this a sneak peek into feats of alchemy. This poem is titled Modern Day Sarcophagus. Today I sent Dr. Frankenstein a sign in the cloud columns rising from each suburban chimney. The wisps were carried by a polar updraft until my message was etched across the crisp winter blue, saying, "Don't worry, I've sewn my mouth shut, wrapped myself in a name brand shroud, and rolled the stone in front of my tomb for you." As each spilled chemical slows my synapses, my toes root into the depths and tether me to a hope that he'll revive me after a time, after this cold industrial stagnance has passed, because the smokestacks, money rivers, and streams of hate have become flash floods. Perhaps, by some alchemy, the doctor will raise me from seed to tree and allow me to breathe a life into this world again, allow me to add a wall of green and soak up each political threat that falls as acid rain.
Oh, interesting.
Escapism, lots of escapism.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's like sewing your mouth shut so you're being quiet and like it's like being forced to be quiet, but like being raised from the dead and like not not being able to like it's just being like it's like not being in control, but like also being in having someone take control for you and revive you from whatever unrest that you're experiencing.
Exactly. Like you hit it right on the head. And as I was reading it and I read the mouth sewn shut part, I remembered that the first two lines of your first poem also had that image too. So I was just like, escapism parallel, yes. Forcing ourselves into silence. um like honestly, I wrote this on a cold day when I was kind of having some mental health difficulties, and I was just thinking about what's happened in the world recently and the fact that we are all placed under these expectations. And in my mind, like while writing this, I envisioned myself as being like this, I don't know, this creature that might wake up to a better existence if Dr. Frankenstein comes around and finds some way to revive me again, you know?
Yeah.
So like, and I've really wanted to write a Frankenstein themed poem, a Dr. Frankenstein poem. So bam, and he'll probably be popping up again at some point in the book. We'll see. P.S. Godzilla will be popping up a few times as well too. So sci-fi, woo.
I love it.
What one are you gonna read next?
Um, okay. This one I wrote at the beginning of or middle of February. It's called What Could It Be? So here we go. Lift free the foot and slam it down hard on the grave gives you goosebumps as you pass. No worries, this is how it's supposed to be. Dear young fraternity, isn't it? And then some. All manner of outside squeaking like a wheel turned sideways in the grocery store. Looking like a cook, I'll bake the bread to your dinner if I can. Have a seat at the table, I guess, but still then it all will be what's meant to be. Boys will be boys and girls will sit out. I am somewhere drifting on the edge of black holes in the next galaxy.
Oh my God. Well, oh, that last image. Can you read that again?
So boys will be boys and girls will sit out, and I am somewhere drifting on the edge of black holes in the next galaxy.
That really hit close.
So
Like,
that's a non-binary like idea. So it's like boys will be boys, girls will sit out, and I am. somewhere completely off in the next
Yeah,
galaxy.
like it's like this isolation. I was thinking of it in a social context because I'm always that person that, in a way, like I deliberately isolate myself when I don't feel comfortable. But coming from the context of being non-binary, that definitely changes the trajectory, because you're not intentionally isolating, you are isolated because of these socially constructed dynamics that are subliminally acted on, right, by these groups of people. So that is a powerful piece.
Yeah.
How when you wrote it, how were you feeling when you wrote it? Like, what was your thought process as you were going through it?
I was feeling a little, so I was thinking about just like the way things were, and just like I was just frustrated about like just things in general, that I don't know. There was something I was thinking about, something specific. I don't remember what it was now, but it was something to do with like um men, and specifically just like that these guys were getting a pass on something, and it was just like that it was like dear young fraternity. These guys just like I feel like they just got away with something, and like it just I think it was a TikTok that it was just like these guys were just like being just stupid guys, and it was just like I don't know, it was just it really annoyed the crap out of me, and I just felt like that it just really made me mad that like guys can just do whatever they want, and then girls will just like sit by the sidelines and just like laugh and giggle, and then like non-binary people are just like, well, there's no place for us. So we're just kind of like, where's the rest of us? Like, we're just kind of like not really, we don't really have a place even. Like, there's not even, we don't even set out. Like, we just don't even have a place in the universe because, like, they'll just ask us if we're a boy or a girl, and then what's that?
That's that's such an important commentary to create too. And like, because it really draws attention to privilege, a different type of privilege though, a privilege that allows people to pass simply for being men in certain contexts, actually in most contexts.
So I pass as a woman, and so most people just think that I'm a woman.
Hmm.
And so I get that a lot, that I'm just a woman passing in the world, but because I don't have androgyny, that I'm a woman, and it's like, no, I'm non-binary. And it's like,
Hmm.
I I I am non-binary. But I have to kind of assert myself sometimes and really push that out there. But it's difficult at times to like, because I don't have that androgyny.
Hmm. Well, that, and I mean, it's also unsettling that a person has to be placed in the position of having to point such things out, also combined with the uncertainty of how people will react as well.
Hmm.
I mean, if they react openly and, educate themselves and correct themselves, that's one thing, but there's no way of knowing if it'll be that type of reaction or if it'll be people retaliating.
Right. And then they'll
So,
say, "Oh, you're just a woman." I'm like,
mhm,
"Oh,
like it continuing that cruel cycle of invalidation. Wow.
right.
Yeah. That's a very important piece. I'm glad that you read that one. You said you wrote that one earlier this month?
Yeah."
So, let's see. Another one from Carbon Footprint. Well, before I read one more, I am going to read some comments really quickly. Um, Shayna says that poem really hit close to home as an autistic person and as non-binary. Thank you for sharing that, Shayna.
Thanks, Shayna.
Arpy says, I have created a poem called Ode to Homophobes that, in a way, like draws attention to that Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve phrase that a lot of people say who are, well, homophobic, right? That's super interesting, Arby. Let's see. This poem is a shorter one. It's from Carbon Footprint. It's in the last section of the book. I don't think I've performed this one often. It's called Orogenesis. And what orogenesis is, it's the geological act of the Earth's crust hefting mountains toward the sky, like where, you know, the crust meets and mountains forming. I've always been really interested by that process, so I wrote a poem about it. The earth and I have forgotten how to rest. Sleep no longer satisfies as shut eyes divide the time between geologic periods. I taught Gaia how to laugh again at my expense when I told her that my Mesozoic era was my 20s. Mass extinctions and attempted cataclysms were well documented throughout that decade of fossilized diaries. Some days I envy the soil below as it exhales beyond my range of perception, as it readies itself for the next tumultuous phase. After all, in every era, there's a lull of solace as our plates prepare to heave mountains toward the sun.
Wow, I really like it.
Thank you. I'm trying to remember what the headspace was in when I wrote it. It was before I started having therapy again, and I used to go through these cycles where I would get depressed over something, or I would have some sort of like mental health cycle where I would tell myself, Donny, you've dealt with this before. Why is this still a thing? Why is it still bothering you? Like, it should be resolved, right? And in growing, I've learned, as I've grown with my mental health journey, I've discovered that it's a cycle. Like, it's something that sometimes you circulate back to, and that there shouldn't be shame in revisiting those things or having to be confronted with those things again, because if it's meant to happen, if you're meant to confront those same insecurities or shifts, then you just have to, right?
But it seems like the way that you suggested in the poem is that it was always getting worse because it's pushing the plates towards the sun, and that it's
Mhm.
not getting better. It's actually like pushing it up towards getting an apex, like a point of like no return.
Exactly. And that's how I was feeling also when I wrote it, because it was something where I felt like I should have dealt with it, but it had gotten so bad this time around that it felt jagged and really like unabashedly painful, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
yeah, it reached a new height. I guess that, yes, I like that you said apex. That really hits it.
hmm
Mm. What one would you like to read next?
Um.
I figured we each could read one more and then we could call it an evening.
Oh goodness.
No pressure, right?
What could I read? Uh, I'll read
While
the
you're looking for yours,
fight.
I'm looking for my next one.
I'll read the fight.
Oh, what page is that on?
That's on page 17. I'll read another one about a fight. Solidarity costs nothing and everything. The words fell out of your mouth like daggers, then sludge. It poured over me in thick barrels of illness. I coughed in its wake. Don't come down on me. I escaped with my life, but just barely. My head reeling as I drove away. observing the waves of tension as they flowed, my belly empty, my mind full, and then rode it all the way home to safety. When you didn't come, I was first relieved, then sadness filled me. What a reminder, we live in a fallout. We tend our garden with poison flowers. Come to get you, my pretty.
Oh, that is one of my favorite poems in this book. The imagery itself. I mean, there's a lot of aspects of it that are really powerful, but the imagery where you say words fell out of your mouth like daggers than sludge and it poured over me in thick barrels of illness. Like there's this underlying theme of pollution, toxicity, poison that really illustrates the context surrounding this fight that is being spoken about. And the lines of we tend our gardens with poison flowers, come home to get you, my pretty. That we tend our gardens with poison flowers. Like we plant these gardens and they look beautiful, but they can be painful, they can be damaging in some way. Wow.
Yeah, and then my belly empty, my mind full. It's like I'm not fulfilled in some way, but my mind is like rushing with all of these thoughts of like what's happening.
What's happening? Probably scenarios, probably like, yeah. It's like this poem, to me, it sounds like coming down from an adrenaline rush and kind of discovering the cruel reality of what had just happened, especially toward the end when you say when you didn't come, I was first relieved, then sadness filled me. So like there's a transition there between those emotions, and I think that transition is so important. I like, friends, if you have not bought Full of Now yet, consider this another one of my plugs for it, because it, as a person who is on my own mental health journey, like it really resonates with me in so many different ways.
You should buy Carbon Footprint too, if you haven't already.
Thank you. I appreciate you. So I will read one more poem. This one is a weird poem. And it is from Feats of Alchemy. It might go through some edits. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's titled Vintage Emo. Oh, the pain left behind, now the high we never had, still dries in tear ducts from the old high school famine we fathom as ancient past. In every snapshot, our faces freeze frame into strained delirium until we wow with our smiles well enough to pass as bliss. Now our eyeliner grows leaden in old palettes, and our skinny jeans shamefully fray in mirrors we feign our concert venues.
I like how it flows. It has like a lot of alliteration. And it has just like this like da 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 da. And it is very it has just like this very airiness to it that seems very like it just seems very like not not childish but like kind of like very like not it just seems very like uh fun is the
It's
word I'm looking for.
it's definitely intended to be immature. So I think the childish thing that you mentioned was exactly what was intended with it. I like what inspired it is I was looking through old pictures that my friends and I had taken, like early college. You remember me with long hair and like me going through my little phases and stuff like that. Like I couldn't stop thinking about what would we be like if we still were like that now? Like how would things have shifted? How would things change,
Oh
or
man.
not change, So like there's like this cruel irony of how we kind of romanticize the past in a way, but is it a past that we really want to romanticize, right?
Like, is it a past that we really want to go back to?
Exactly. So, oh my goodness. All right, this has been such a great episode.
I am really happy with this episode, but we are at an hour and 20
We are,
minutes.
yes. We need to head off, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in and being here with us for almost an hour and a half. This is our longest episode so far. So, anyway, click like on the video, subscribe to our channels. Ari's channel is Strange Nothings. If you're not subscribed to mine yet and you're watching this, you probably are subscribed already. Of course, buy the books that we've mentioned tonight. We really appreciate the support, and we will see you again next Friday. We love you and have a good night. Bye.
Bye.